Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And I welcome you today with my special guest, Mary Key. Dr. Mary Key, how are you doing, Mary?
Wonderful. And it's great to be on your show. I love being rebellious.
I love it. That is why you're on the show, because we want to attract rebellious spirits here. And we want to get to know Mary. Mary, you have a fascinating background. You are an international speaker, author, executive coach. You have so much of a diverse background working with top Fortune 500 companies. And we'll get all into that. But first, let's start with my favorite question. Give us 3 words that tell us who Mary is and a little bit of a backstory behind each word.
Okay, so 3 adjectives that I would use to describe me. One is passionate. I'm passionate about what I do. And I think that has helped me focus on those things that mean most. Now, that doesn't mean I always get to it as quickly, but that passion always keeps coming back. Kind of like you were telling me your story, Maria, where, you were in finance, but you just wanted to use your body and move and help others do that. And so that passion comes through. So passion is definitely one of the words. The other is purposeful. I think that I want to be authentic and purposeful in what I do and align with that. And the last one is probably creative. I enjoy putting things together in different ways, and I like to start things.
I love it. I do think that, tell me if you agree, that the words purpose and passion kind of go together.
They do.
Right? When you're passionate about something, I think it brings, for me, that is definitely the case. It brings you about your purpose, and that is where my journey has taken me. So let's talk a little bit about that, Mary, because you do a lot of work around leadership.
Yes.
And that is powerful work. Let's talk about the power of all those P words of passion and purpose when it gets to leadership.
Well, one of the things, Maria, that I have always done when I work with people in leadership roles is take some time to talk with them about what is purposeful for you. And I love to ask the question, if success were assured, what is it that really draws you? And then getting into a conversation about what do you stand for? What are those guiding principles that you don't want to compromise? Because when people have a sense of what's my purpose or mission and what are my core values, they can better assess, am I in the right role I'm in? Do these align? They don't have to be identical, but do they align with what I'm doing in this organization? And then how do those play out with the people I lead? So I think clarity and authenticity around purpose is really important. And it's not always something people think about.
Yeah, and I think you brought up 2 keywords as I was listening to you, and their value. And it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with somebody this weekend, and what he said to me is, sometimes I feel like I don't belong. And I said, that he was talking in the context of work. And I said, that is a very powerful statement and something you should investigate, because maybe there is a conflict with your value system of what is valuable to you. And not to say that there is one thing that's more valuable than another, but we all have different perspectives, right? So we all have a different lens to how we look at new things. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. Value and the second word you brought up was alignment. And I talk about alignment a lot, because we have our physical alignment, but then we also have our emotional alignment, our mental alignment, our value alignment. Yes. In the context of leadership that you brought up. So let's talk about alignment. What happens when you're misaligned with yourself into how you show up as a leader?
Well, I think that whole question of whether people can trust you or not, because people notice like something's out of whack here. What they're saying and how they're behaving isn't lined up. And many times people don't want to be distrustful, but they don't know how to trust that person because it's not aligned.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's
Don't worry, take a sip of water.
Yes, I will.
I think that
It's
goes.
hay fever season here in Tampa, Florida, and the pollen is just terrible.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes feel that. So pardon me.
No problem. I think, Mary, something that you're talking about too is something I talk about is energy.
Yes.
Sometimes you can say things, but when there is misalignment between what you say and what you do, people can feel the energy of misalignment, that
Yes.
Something is off, and they can't necessarily put their finger on it, but it's felt in the energy that's around you.
It is. And it's also something doesn't ring quite true. So you spend a lot of time in the conversation, not really communicating because you're trying to feel out, well, what does this mean? What is that person talking about? And one of the things that I worked on in my life, an entrepreneurial venture, I was telling a little bit about the Women's Forum. I started that in 2014 and recently, was able to have that acquired by a company that wants to do something with it on an even larger scale. But one of the guiding principles and something that resonated with the executive women that participated is we talked about the purpose of the Women's Forum was to align mind, body, spirit, and career. And there are very few places, especially for women in leadership roles, where they can explore all of those alignments. And I'm one of those people, and I think this rings true for many people. I don't believe you can be one person on the job to fulfill your career and be someone else in another place. So that alignment across mind, body, spirit, career, I think is essential for our own mental health and self-care, but also in coming across positively in whatever we do.
I think you bring up a very good point. What's resonating with me is frequently I hear talks about separating personal life and professional life. And I'm like, you can't do that, because if one is in a disarray, it will affect the other one. So when you're missing that synchrony of how you show up, regardless of what part of your life, right? It will show up. It would show up in every aspect of your life. It will show up in your career, in your family, in your relationships with friends, in whatever else what you do, your communication with community, anything else that you do. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that is true. And, it sounds kind of exhausting when we talk about this, but I do think that once you do some reflection and look at where am I aligned and where am I not, then it almost becomes automatic, and that alignment isn't so hard, and it builds a synergy. Jim Collins and a lot of the work he did, like From Good to Great, and he's done other things. He talks about this concept of the flywheel, where once you have something going that really works, it takes on an energy and really just spins in such a way to create growth and also alignment. And if you're not aligned, you really can't do that. So
once again, interesting you bring this up, because just today I was having a conversation with a client, and I frequently ask people when they feel off, where do you feel that in your body? And in the beginning, when somebody is not connected to their body, sometimes I get the look of like, what? And right. And it takes some time to create that awareness. I had a client one time called me. She called me in the middle of the day to where I was like, why is she calling me? I hope everything is okay. And she goes, Maria, she's like, I have to tell you, I know what you're talking about. When you talk about feeling it in your body, something happened at work. And she's like, I could feel my shoulders and neck tensing up and tightness. She's like, I now know what you're talking about. And that is creating awareness around what happens. Something happens at work. How does that affect your body? How does that affect your mind? Can you talk a little bit more about, in the context of, let's take C-level positions, right? What have you observed in your work? Like, in how does the stress, the intensity, the pressure show up into the physical of C-level executives?
Well, part of it is perception. You were talking a little bit earlier, I think, about how we frame things, about mindset, right? And so the one thing I notice is that if we have a mindset that is focused on here are the most important things, and this is why they're important. And even though we're busy, it's framed in such a way that it's not necessarily a high stress thing. Those are the people at the C-suite level that do really well, have lots of energy, get a lot done, resilient, and actually model the right behaviors for those they lead. When people are stressed and they start feeling their neck tense up, and their stomach starts to hurt, and so they're like fighting through that and not feeling great, but they're trying to get everything done. That's when they snap at people. That's when some of the executives are told they have style issues, because when people get that way, many times they're highly task focused and they just want to get everything done. So they come across as maybe more directive than they should be, and people don't really feel great about working with them. So a lot of it is how we handle our energy. And there was an interesting study that was done on stress. And what is so powerful about this study is that it lasted 8 years, and it was done with over 20,000 people. And people were asked several simple questions. Do you experience stress? If so, to what degree? Low, medium, high, off the scale. And do you feel stress is harmful? Mm-hmm. And what they did is they went back and they studied death records. Yes, death records. So this is verifiable because these people died, right? None of the people who said they experienced stress, whether even if it was high, that said it was not, they did not necessarily see it as harmful, none of those people died. It was the people who saw stress as harmful and reported feeling it to high levels all the time. So how we perceive things is really important. And many times I tell people when they're preparing, like for a high stakes presentation, they get all nervous and they don't want to do it. And of course, they remind you, hey, people would rather die than speak in front of a group. Why do I have to do this? Blah, blah, blah. But your body's trying to help you out. So I say, well, notice, are your palms sweaty? Are you breathing a little bit more or more quickly? And your body is trying to prepare you. So what are you telling yourself about your body? It's important to say, well, thank you, body. You're helping me because this is high stakes presentation, and you're helping me make this a good performance. So how we perceive things is more important many times than what's really going on, because it's how we color it.
I think a very good point on the first part of what you talked about is how you respond to a situation versus how you react to a situation, right? Respond is something doesn't go the way you want it to. You take a deep breath and say, how do we handle the problem? What do we do now? Versus you start snapping at everybody who is around you. It's this person's fault, that person's fault, and it's not leading forward towards a resolution, right?
Right.
And that's the response versus reactiveness.
Right.
And then very interesting to the study that you suggested, because I'll tell you what I see sometimes in people is they're very highly stressed. They haven't slept, they haven't eaten right, and they come and they're like, I need a hardcore workout.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, you just told me, you haven't peed, you haven't pooped, you haven't eaten, you haven't slept, but you
all the P's. Yeah.
Right. So sometimes I remind them of tune into your body and really check in with yourself, because it's, a lot of times people will tell me, maybe you've heard that, they'll say, well, I'm used to stress. The fact that you're used to stress doesn't mean that stress is good for you. Right?
No, it doesn't. And the second point that I built to build on your summary there is it's also how you frame it. And so if I frame, oh my God, the CEO wants this, I'm running this division, it has to be this way, I got to get, so how are you framing it? What do you, and then how do you frame it for others? And in leadership, that's key, because many times a leader has a vision of where things are going, and sometimes they communicate it And in fairness, a lot of times people don't really listen to it. And then you might have a job that might be redundant. So I'm sitting in this place and I'm going through all the data. And it's very redundant. And, maybe in finance, you experience that sometime. And so you're not seeing where this is going. So you're not feeling really energized by where the project or what the work you're doing is. But if you have an effective leader, they remind you, they say, Maria, when you take the time to be so accurate and get these numbers, not only on time, but ahead, so we can anticipate them, this is how it impacts our company's growth. And this is how it's going to help us meet our bigger vision of XYZ. That's what an effective leader does. They help you reframe in the workplace. And then I think people like you that work with people who are there for the self-care, the physical part, how you help them frame that is important as well. And more stress in terms of body stress is not the key when you're already feeling stress and hungry.
Yes. And it's so similar to, for example, if I work with somebody who is in pain,
Right.
reframing, they do an exercise and it doesn't feel good, it's achy, they feel weak. It's not the most encouraging thing to do, right? And they do maybe one rep and they feel defeated. It's all right, let's talk about why we're doing this. And you have to pump them up, right? And say,
Right.
well, and I throw in humor. I'm like, well, those muscles have been used to being dormant and now we're waking them up and they're not so happy,
Yeah.
Like you said, reframe it to where they're like, okay, I can do another rep of this versus being defeated of, my body can move or I'll always be in pain. And then they get into their head and that just spirals down versus pain. So I think you're so right. And that goes to life too, right? It's not just at work, it's in personal life, it's in relationship, it's about how we feel about our bodies, our spirits. I think it's so powerful.
And to your point, when we don't feel good about something we're doing, we avoid it. And so you're able to maybe turn people around at a critical point in their physical program. And of course, you do more than just the physical, but getting them to do it, because I can't tell you how many people I know that have walked away. I'm too busy to work out. There are all these reasons, but a lot of it's discomfort and not wanting to feel bad.
Yeah, and that's so spot on, because I can tell you how many clients I have who say, wow, my longest workout routine has been 2 months, 3 months. They're like, now I've been doing this for years with you. It's exactly that. It's because you changed the mindset of, first of all, exercise is not a punishment. It's something that you do to feel better. So that's a reframe. And then two, how do you feel after you do the workout, right? If you feel good, you want to do it. I tell people, if you fall in love with movement, you never, ever have to work out a day in your life. But if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to go to the gym again, and it's the next thing on your to-do list, you're likely not going to find time for it.
That's so funny. I tell people when they understand or when they understand and love what they do, when they're purposeful, they never have to work another day in their life. So I love to say that, because it's true. It defeats the energy.
Yeah. Mary, tell us a favorite quote or advice that you have for our listeners. Anything that resonates with you deeply that you want to share with us?
Well, I wrote a book called Seizing Success, A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership, just several years back. It's still pretty new. And in it, I talk about what's really important for women in leadership roles, because how we lead is sometimes different for a variety of different reasons. And in the book, I have quotes at the beginning of the chapters. And one of my favorites comes from Eleanor Roosevelt. And she says, I don't want to blow it. Women are like tea bags. You never know how strong they are until they get in hot water.
Yeah. And,
so to me, that hidden strength sometimes, especially that the feminine energy brings, is really important.
Yeah. it resonates with me. I just saw maybe something online today that talked about how seeds grow in darkness, how diamonds are created under pressure, and there were more examples. But basically, how we transform when we are put under pressure, and I think that resonates with what you're saying. And to the feminine energy, I have frequently conversation with females which get about, well, how it is, especially in the corporate world with men and all of that. And I tell people, if you stand as who you are, your authentic self, if you speak up, if you're feminine, that is okay. Embrace that. And when you send that energy out, I do think, and from personal experience, I do think it's a powerful thing, because you will be heard and people will have respect for you.
Yes, absolutely. There's some fine tuning things. So, because if I were to ask you what makes a successful leader, you might say things like, I solve problems, I go first, I'm decisive, and all of those characteristics line up with how we see men in the workplace, especially, but in general. And when women behave that way, which is very important, it's a disconnect sometimes because women are still seen as harmonizers, the mediators, the collaborators. And so it's important to use all of those things and to then be thinking about how might I present certain things. So, for example, a woman can be a lot more powerful if she uses nonverbal assertiveness. So she sits tall, she uses her hands, she uses her eyes to look directly at people. And sometimes when a woman or any person feels a little more like unsure, they'll make themselves smaller. They'll use words like, oh, I just have a little thing I'd like to add, as opposed to, have we thought about this? So you see the difference. And so I think sometimes women in leadership are a little more susceptible to not always bringing their best confident selves to the table. And when they don't feel reinforced, it reinforces that lack of confidence.
Yeah. That's why we joke with my clients. I don't know if I have ever shared this on the podcast before, but we have a saying with my female clients, PTO, pop them out. That is how So
I have a friend that always says, knockers up.
So I'm always like PTO now. Even some clients know that saying, because that relates. And, I talk to people about posture and core strength, right?
Yeah.
There is a difference of how, if I were sitting like this and talking to you versus if I sit up tall. And that's exactly how you present yourself and the energy that you send out and how you fill up the room with your energy and presence. So that is a great tip for any female leader.
Yes.
I have to say, even the young girls, I think that's a very important tip for them.
It is. And in fairness, there's so many things about leadership. I work with a lot of men because, men tend to be in the C-suite more, than women. And in my history, I helped Inc. magazine set up CEO roundtables around the country. So I have done a lot of work working with entrepreneurial CEOs and serving as their coach. And they were, predominantly men. We have more women in those ranks, but still that's the case. And there's some really important things, I think, for all people in leadership roles. And one big one is to have an inspiring and engaging vision for where you see the organization going, or for your part of the organization, how it fits into the overall corporate strategy if you work in a very large company. And I don't think a lot of people spend time thinking about that. So a question that's important on an individual level, but also on an organizational level, is if my highest wishes for this organization or for this team or for this division were realized in the next 3 to 5 years, what would I see, or what would we see? And then for yourself, like if my highest wishes for myself at this point, and I mentioned to you that my company was acquired, so kind of in a transition, starting up some new things now. So I'm asking myself the question, okay, my highest wishes for my next steps and for the people I'm involved with were realized in the next 3 to 5 years, what would I see? And I think that's really an important question to be thinking about. And it's not one that we naturally do.
Yeah.
Naturally, as people, many times we're sort of in the day, in the moment, we're in the tactical part, which is important.
Yeah, but I think what you're talking about is about pausing, being intentional and present. And I think it beautifully circles around with the way we started this conversation, which is passion. Because I think if you're passionate, regardless of what project is, you know, whether it's integrating financial systems or doing Pilates or doing coaching, if you have the passion and if you present that and make it contagious for your team, I think you will see miracles happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Mary, we can keep talking. This is certainly a hot topic and there is so much that goes into it. But let's wrap up with you telling us, what is your definition of rebellious?
For me, someone who is rebellious is a person who doesn't just accept what the perceived norm is. And they're not necessarily, rebellion isn't, I believe in strategic rebelliousness. It's important to rock the boat, but not just to rock the boat because you want to do it, because you can do it. It's purposeful. It's, again, that other word. It's because you really believe in something, and why not? You know, one of the things that we did in our community a while back is we were seeing all these cats and dogs being euthanized. And we started something called No More Homeless Pets. And although there are a percentage of animals in our community that still are euthanized, it helped the Humane Society of Tampa Bay to go no kill for space. And so sometimes, you know, just saying, why are we doing that? Why are we automatically, if these creatures don't get adopted, by the way, why are we doing that? And I think you have to do that. You have to, when you believe in something, or if it doesn't make sense, go after it and don't assume that somebody else is doing it. Because I think we do that a lot. You know, I know people with recycling, like there's so much stuff with recycling. In apartment complexes, people still don't recycle. They don't have places where they can do that. And then you see somebody say, wait a minute, I'm gonna buck this system, and I'm gonna demand that this is what we get, you know. And I think that kind of rebelliousness where the purpose is important.
Yeah, purposefulness, passion, and rebellion. I like that.
Yes.
Mary, tell people where they can find you if they wish to connect with you, ask you questions.
Absolutely. The website is drmarykey.com. That's DrMaryKey.com. And my email is mary@drmarykey.com. Please visit the website. There's ways to get a hold of me there. You can email me, my phone if you want to, you know, set something up. But I do look forward to hearing back if people have questions or there's just something that they want to noodle. And I've really enjoyed being with you, Maria. You're really a light, and you do a lot more with your rebellious approach than you think.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's all about passion and purpose, just like we started talking about that. But I do appreciate your time. I know you are a busy entrepreneur. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. And Rebels, thank you for tuning in and listening. Should you have any questions, certainly let us know. Stay rebellious, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share.